Hello, here I am again with my book, Forest Folklore, and I am actually reading out of the trunk of my car again. Everything's rainy. It's really supposed to rain hard today, so I'm kind of liking this. It's cozy. It feels nice. I'm right next to the forest, which is nice. There's a really nice spot near here. I like to climb up to the top of a really high up cliff. I'll probably go up there another day because right now it's soaking wet and it's going to rain a lot rather soon. So here I am. Not sure, this place can get kind of crowded sometimes. Might not be as crowded today because of the fact that it's supposed to rain a lot. But here I am, and I'm going to continue where we left off with Mythical Denizens on page 105. And I have a nice black coffee. All right. Elves in the British Islands were closely akin to the fairies and were often confounded with them, but the main difference appears to have been in the generally malicious disposition of the former. One of the beliefs in former days was that the elves and the fairies delighted to take a part in the family festive gatherings held at Christmas time, and the origin of the custom of hanging evergreens in houses at that period was that these elves might take shelter among the leaves from the usual wintry character of the weather. There used to be a pretty saying that in the autumn the little elves fly away on the brown oak leaves. The forests of the Slav countries in general are found to be peopled with mythical beings of a usually malevolent type, though in some instances they have a beneficent character. In the Russian forests, what were known as lyshi, forest devils or genii of the forest, were considered to be always present in clumps of trees, and particularly on the tops of birch trees. These beings were believed to be able to accommodate their stature according to their environment. Thus, when they were wandering in the forest, they were as tall as the trees, but when they appeared on the plains, they did not exceed the blades of grass in height. Professor Manhart tells of the means taken to invoke these genii. He says that very young birches are cut down and placed in a circle with the points towards the center. They then enter the circle and invoke the spirit, which at once appears. Then they step onto the stump of one of the cut trees with their face turned towards the east and bend their heads so that they look between their legs. While in this position they say, "Uncle Lyshi, ascend thou, not as a grey wolf, not as an ardent fire, but as resembling myself." Then the leaves tremble, and the Lyshi arises under a human form, and agrees to give the service for which he has been invoked, provided they promise him their soul. There is a Russian proverb to the effect that either an owl or a devil frequents all old trees. I shall have a taste of coffee. Oh boy, that's nice. It's nice and hot. The Tsarevich Ivan is said to have once seen two forest demons fighting. One was showering blows upon the other with an uprooted oak tree, while the other was returning the blows with interest with an uprooted pine tree as his weapon. The fight waged furiously, the demons exerting all their strength, but how it ended tradition saith not. The intensity of the Russian winter has caused the frost to be regarded as a demon under the name of Morozko. And frost cracks, something has just landed on me, I think. Just a second here. Kind of looked like a little moth flew in and landed on me. Alrighty. Well, he's here somewhere probably. So, anyhow, the intensity of the Russian winter had caused the frost to be regarded. Yeah, there's a baby spider. That's interesting. Here, little dude, you move over there. You must be from my house because you were inside the car. Oh me, oh my. Always so many creatures around. Let me try that paragraph again. The intensity of the Russian winter has caused the frost to be regarded as a demon under the name of Morozko, and frost cracks and breaks in the trees are attributed to his agency. There is a tale of a maiden who's lost in the forest when all at once she heard something. Morozko was crackling in a fir tree not far off, and he leaped from fir to fir and snapped his fingers. Formerly in eastern Russia, there was a demon who assumed the shape of a mourning widow and haunted the harvest fields at noon. Should the harvesters fail to fall on their faces when they saw her, she would break their legs and arms. Fortunately, there was a remedy in the forest close at hand. There, several sacred trees grew, and by placing some of the bark on the wounds, they were at once healed. The Russians had a belief in certain wood nymphs or wood maids called rusalki, who were very beautiful, with long green hair, and who swung on the branches of trees in the forests. They were usually seen about Whitsuntide, often bathing in lakes and rivers, and at that season the people used to weave garlands for them and cast them into the waters. Probably some natural growth or parasite of the trees originated this belief. The fort was founded by, a fort was founded by the Swedes in 1298 on the banks of the river Neva. Oh my goodness, another baby spider. A spider must have laid their eggs around this car or something. So far I've found 2 baby spiders while filming this. Okay, so a fort was founded by the Swedes in 1298 on the banks of the river Neva for protection against the inroads of the Russians, and tradition says that about that period a loud and continuous knocking was heard in the forest near the river. The people wondered greatly what the knocking could mean, until at last a peasant bravely entered the forest in order to investigate the cause. After he had penetrated some distance, he came upon a wood spirit busily engaged in hewing a stone. On being asked what it meant, the spirit replied that this stone shall be the boundary between the land of the Swedes and the Muscovites. The Cherkasses, a tribe of Circassians, are said to have worshipped a god of woods and hunting, whose name was Masech, and who, in his career through the forests, rode a wild boar with golden bristles. There is a mischievous spirit who lives in the forests of Estonia, called Metsek. Like some of the fairies and witches of other countries, he must have propitiated so that he will not injure the cattle. To achieve this, elaborate ceremonies are gone through in which an image of the spirit figures largely. Even up to the last century, the Estonians believed many trees to be inhabited by powerful spirits, and in such awe were these held that they did not dare to break off a branch from a tree, nor would they even venture to pluck a flower from the ground on which the shadow of the tree fell. These people have also the belief that when a thunderstorm comes on, the forest spirits seek refuge from the lightning among the roots of the trees which they inhabit. A Lithuanian demon was called Kirnis and was the guardian of the cherry tree. A Swedish superstition says that in the case of theft, the victim appealed to a troll man or cunning man who carved a figure on a young tree. He then muttered potent spells to invoke the aid of the devil and finally drove a sharp instrument into the eye of the figure, the belief being that at the same moment a corresponding injury would befall the eye of the thief. In an epic of Finland called the Kalevala, a nymph is mentioned as having her abode in the service tree, and she is also understood to protect cattle. Often at night in the forests of Finland, a hideous cry is heard, which is alleged to proceed from the forest demons who ever haunt the woods. Among the numerous gods who presided over the destinies of Finland was a special god of the forest named Tapio, to whom all the wild beasts of the forest belonged, and over which he and his beautiful goddess reigned. To these sylvan deities the hunter had to appeal for permission ere he ventured to hunt or slay any of the forest animals, and oblations were offered to them to induce them to drive the game across the hunter's path. They also protected domestic cattle, both in their stalls and if they should have happened to have strayed into the forest. The Laplanders worshipped a similar forest god. In Poland, a female spirit called a Zywitza is very fond of hunting, both in the daytime and on moonlight nights. She appears to be the prototype of the classical huntress, Diana or Artemis. She was believed to be a young and lovely princess. Just a moment, I'm going to pause my video. Well, I paused my video for a second because a car pulled up near me, but they just seemed to be parking. I just thought they might get out and kind of make some noise and stuff, but it's all right either way. So, yeah, she was believed to be a young and lovely princess who roamed the forests accompanied by a most splendid pack of hounds, and she carried a zilba, or kind of javelin. She was in the habit of appearing to people who happened to be in the forest at midday and terrifying them. So it came to be a kind of joke to say to people who had been alone in the fir woods at noon, "Are you not afraid Zywitza will come to you?" Another female wood spirit in Poland was called Boruta, who was said to inhabit fir trees. In one of the songs of Bulgaria, we read that the mother of Stoyan endeavored to dissuade that young shepherd from leading his flock through the forest of the Samodivs, who are a kind of forest demon, or at least from playing his flute when traversing it, because at the first sound the invoked Samodiv would come to wrestle with him. Stoyan disobeyed, and instantly he saw a young man with disordered hair who sought a quarrel with him. The demon, after 3 days of battle, invoked his sisters, the Tempests, who carried Stoyan over the tops of the trees, beat him, knocked him, tore him to pieces, and destroyed his flock. Another Bulgarian song tells how the forest, without the wind blowing, was uprooted by the mere touch of dragons with long white hair. These pass over. These pass over with their wives in chariots of gold and their children in cradles of gold. Professor de Gubernatus suggests that these dragons with white hair show to us the snowy winter, and their wives are perhaps the days of summer which they carry away, and their children the days of springtime which they will bring back. A female being peculiar to Serbian mythology is the villa, who partakes of the characteristics of both the fairy and the elf. These villas, represented as mountain nymphs, live in the forests on the hills and love singing and dancing. They are young and beautiful with long, flowing hair and are usually clad in white. They often mount up into the air from whence they discharge fatal arrows at men, but they injure none except those who intrude on their revels. There is a Serbian saying, Ustrailila ga villa, meaning the villa has shot him with her dart. They are often seen sitting on ash trees singing, and they converse with the stags in the forest. A Serbian song narrates how a young deer tracked his way through the lone forest one lonely day. Another came in sadness, and the third dawned and brought him sighs and sorrow. Then he addressed him to the forest villa. Young deer, she said, thou wild one of the forest, now tell me what great sorrow has oppressed thee. Why wanderest thou thus in the forest lonely? Lonely one day, another day in sadness, and the third day with sighs and anguish groaning. And thus the young deer to the villa answered, O thou sweet sister, villa of the forest, me has indeed a heavy grief befallen. For I once had a fawn, mine own beloved, and one sad day she sought the running water. She entered it, but came not back to bless me. The villas ride through the forests on a 7-year-old stag, which they bridle with snakes, and their cry, echoing through the woods, resembles the sound of the woodpecker. Should a mother in anger consign her child to the devil, it is believed that the villa has a peculiar right to that child. They often appear dancing gaily round a cherry tree, and a Serbian ballad begins. Cherry, dearest cherry, higher lift thy branches, under which the villas dance their magic roundels. I have found another spider. Wow. Okay, where was I? The cumulus clouds of a summer day are supposed to be castles which the villa builds in the air, and there her daughters Munya, or the lightning, plays with her brothers, the two thunders. The villa is a skillful physician curing wounds for a high fee, but if offended she will poison her patient. In Romania, a forest fairy named Muma Padura goes into the forest to seek for and to help children who have strayed thither and lost themselves. The wild huntsman is found also in Carinthia, where the peasant places a wooden bowl full of meat on a tree in front of his house so as to propitiate the wind, that it may do him no harm. The maidens of Franconia still go to a certain tree on St. Thomas's Day and knock on its trunk 3 times. They then listen intently to hear the spirit which dwells within the tree tell them by means of answering knocks what kind of husbands they will have. In the sunny lands of Greece and Italy, where the woods and groves waved perpetually green beneath the azure heavens, and the calm lakes reflected the summer skies in their pellucid depths, each grove, each tree, each river, each lake, and even each pool was regarded by the ancients as being the home of supernatural beings, who bore different names and possessed different qualities and attributes. The early inhabitants of Italy do not appear to have had the same facility for invention which characterized the Greeks, and consequently they adopted the ancient deities of Greece, but called them by other names. Thus the mythology of Italy is very similar to that of Greece, but lacks the true poetic touch which was a feature of the latter. The most powerful of these mythical beings came in course of time to be worshipped as the principal gods, and there were many lower beings to whom a certain meed of reverence was paid, while to them was also attributed a human form. Among the latter were nymphs, and it was believed that to them was given the guardianship of the woods and of the trees. These nymphs were of divine origin, and Homer tells that when Zeus, after the return of Achilles to the battle, called a council of the gods, not one was absent, not a rural power that haunts the verdant gloom or rosy bower, each fair-haired dryad of the shady wood, each azure sister of the silver flood. The nymphs which we have particularly to deal with here were imagined by the Greeks as beautiful female forms. They were the wood nymphs or dryads, and a variety of them known as tree nymphs or hamadryads. There were also particular kinds of tree nymphs who frequented fruit trees and watched over gardens. These were called milliads, or million nymphs, and they were also known as flock nymphs because they took flocks of sheep under their protection. They were also known in Italy, and Kitely relates a legend to the effect that in the early ages, when the people of Italy were in the pastoral stage, a number of flock nymphs were once seen by some shepherds dancing at a place in Messapia called the Sacred Rocks. The shepherds, having left their flocks to gaze on them, offended the nymphs by saying they could excel them in dancing. After much argument, a dancing contest was begun, but the light and graceful movements of the nymphs could not be equaled by the clumsy efforts of the youthful shepherds, who, of course, were vanquished. The nymphs then cried out to them, "O youths, you have been contending with the Epimelian nymphs, therefore you shall be punished." At these words the shepherds became trees, forming a grove round the temple of the nymphs. To this day, says Nicander, a voice as of lamentation is heard at night to issue from that grove, and the place is called the place of the nymphs and the youths. One of the Homeric hymns relates that after Dionysus or Bacchus was born, his father handed him over to the care of the nymphs, by whom he was brought up in a shady grotto in the valley of Nysa. After he grew up, he was reckoned as one of the immortals, being the god of wine, and was crowned with laurel and ivy, and whithersoever he went, he was closely attended by a train of nymphs, singing and dancing in joyous abandonment. Dionysus himself loved a nymph named Staphyl. Other varieties of nymphs were the Oreads, or mountain nymphs, which haunted the mountains, the Napoe, or dale nymphs, frequenting the valleys. Those which frequented the meadows, known as Leomoniads, or mead nymphs, and which appear to have approximated more to the fairy type, the Naiads, or water nymphs found by rivers, brooks, and fountains, and the lake nymphs, or limniads, haunting the lakes and pools. Some of the nymphs were distinguished among others, and among them the following may be mentioned. When speaking or calling out loudly in the woods or fields, the ancients would often hear, as we do, their voice repeated once or several times, and this phenomenon was seized upon by them as a pivot round which to weave one of the prettiest legends. The echo became personified and was regarded as a nymph called Echo, who was beloved by the god Pan. She, however, would have none of him, and she had fallen deeply in love with a youth named Narcissus. But the latter was so intensely enamored of his own image, becoming eventually the flower which bears his name, that he rejected her advances and fled whenever he saw her approaching. Deeply chagrined at the coldness of the youth, Echo retired into solitary places, where her unrequited love gradually consumed her away until there was nothing left of her but her voice. She may still be heard speaking far away among the hills and woods. Other explanations of the echo are that it is the voice of Faunus speaking in the woods, or that it proceeds from a wood elf who mocks the speaker. The god Apollo had many loves among the nymphs, of whom Dryope was one. The Hamadryads had become very fond of her and taught her to dance and sing. Apollo saw her when thus engaged and conceived such a strong affection for her that she bore him a son called Amphissos, who, when he grew up, erected a temple to his father. Dryope appeared at the temple one day when the Hamadryads carried her away, causing a poplar tree to spring up in her stead. The legend then tells how Amphissos, out of gratitude to the nymphs for their goodness to his mother, erected a temple to them and instituted sports in their honor. At the latter, however, no woman was permitted to be present because, as was said when Dryope was carried away, two maidens had told the people, upon which the angry nymphs had turned them both into fir trees. Cyrene, the daughter of the river god Peneus, was another of the nymphs loved by Apollo, to whom she bore a son named Aristaeus. To the latter was ascribed the invention of the art of beekeeping. Virgil, Georgix 5, or right here, tells how Aristaeus, being in love with Eurydice, the wife of Orpheus, had relentlessly pursued her, and how the Nepoan nymphs, her companions, had destroyed all his bees. He appealed to his mother Cyrene for assistance when she told him to suppliant bear offerings, beseeching peace, and venerate the gentle wood nymphs, for at your supplications they will grant forgiveness and mitigate their wrath. He carried out all her instructions, sacrificed cattle in the grove, and at last, on the 9th day, they beheld a sudden prodigy. A wonderful to relate, bees through all the belly hum amidst the decomposed bowels of the cattle, pour forth with the fermenting juices from the burst sides, and in immense clouds roll along, then swarm together on the top of a tree and hang down in a cluster from the bending boughs. Among the loves of the god Pan was the water nymph or naiad called Syrinx. She was a nymph of Arcadia, and Pan pursued her till she reached the river Ladon, on the banks of which she implored her sister nymphs to enable her to cross it. Pan, as he thought, had grasped her, but instead found his arms filled with reeds into which she had been changed. Hearing the breeze as it passed through these reeds make a low musical sound, the god plucked 7 of them and formed his pipes, which he named syrinx, or popularly panpipes. Far in the western ocean was the island of Hesperides, who were 3 celebrated nymphs, the daughters of Hesperus. To them was given the guardianship of the garden or grove, wherein grew the golden apples which Juno had given to Jupiter on their nuptial day. Pausanias mentions that at Olympia, where an olive tree grew, from the branches of which the victors' crowns were formed, an altar dedicated to the nymphs of the fair crowns had been erected. Certain young and lovely nymphs who dwelt in forests and groves were known as dryads, and they were the companions and attendants of the huntress goddess Artemis. In the Orlando Furioso, it is said that Rinaldo saw one in the enchanted forest, where an aged oak beside him cleft and rent, and from his fertile hollow womb forth went, clad in rare weeds and strange habiliment, a full-grown nymph. It was considered unlucky to see the dryads, or to keep company with them, and Ovid, in the 4th book of the Fastas, warned Pales not to see the dryads or Diana bathing, or Fanas, when wandering through the fields at midday. As distinguished from the dryads, who, though having their abodes in trees and groves, were free to move about, was another class of beings known as the hamadryads, or purely tree nymphs, who dwelt in trees, and were believed to be part of the tree, and whose existence was closely bound up with that of the tree. In fact, it was believed that the hamadryad was female only to the waist, her lower extremities forming part of the trunks and roots of trees, much in the same way as the mermaid was female to the waist, and the rest of her being a fish's tail. These hamadryad trees were also said to grow only in remote and secluded spots, where men were unlikely to discover them. They seem, however, to have been pretty well known in other parts, as there are frequent allusions to them by the ancient poets. When their tree withers and dies, the hamadryads also cease to be, and when their tree happens to be cut down, a cry of anguish escapes them as the axe descends. We are on page 115, and I have to end this video here, but I will be back soon to make more. Beautiful day. Isn't the forest gorgeous? Lots of love.